morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the GIMI think tank. We meet weekly to discuss things about innovation, innovation trends, innovation management, and what's going on around the world in innovation itself. Innovation trends tells us about what the future looks like, and based on the future, if you can imagine it, perhaps you can create it. Innovation management is actually now, if you can imagine what you could actually do in the future, how do you put together the ideas, the teams to make that real? People, teams, processes. Today's speaker, Greg, is going to talk about people and the importance of people in terms of making innovation real. And then, of course, we also talk about innovation as what's going on in other parts of the world that's been done differently, whether it's Jugaad innovation in India or whether it's innovation as we are seeing being done by Google and Microsoft in the US. So we also like to see different ways to do innovations. Today's speaker, Greg, I'm going to basically age him a little bit. He was one of my students a long time back, probably 2008, I think, maybe 2000. It was 2008. He was a student of mine in the business school, and one of my better students. And he would always provoke me, ask me, challenge me, push me, and asking me about what's next back then. And I'm not surprised today that he's one of the leaders in terms of innovation performance, innovation teams, and other things which goes around that. Greg has basically said, research has shown that it's the teams that matter. It's innovation teams that matter. It's not your idea. It's the teams that make things real. And so he's going to talk about that today. So Greg, first, welcome. Let's put your talking heads together. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in the school, the background, and the work you're doing. But Greg, it's been a long time. Where are you right now physically located?
Thank you. And I really do appreciate the opportunity, Hitendra, to speak on a topic that I didn't know was a passion of mine until a little bit later in life. It took some cycles around the sun, but now I realize that really everything is about us. It's about the humans doing something. And I think that applies globally to innovation as it does to other aspects of teamwork. And so I am coming to you from Canada's beautiful West Coast, Victoria, British Columbia. We've had a bit of a challenging summer in BC. You might have seen on the news, wildfires, evacuations, maybe climate change, but it's a wonderful place to live, and I'm grateful to be here.
No, so the first time I met Greg, we were doing this program called the Innovation Olympics. Mm-hmm. And here what we did was we would take teams, 5 students on a team, and 5 teams that would compete with each other to try and provide the best answer for a senior executive. And I think you did the program with Osram. Is that correct? Osram Sylvania.
Excellent memory.
Right. So Osram Sylvania was asking, what is the future of light bulbs? And we said, let's put 5 teams together to compete. And the Health International Business School, where we were working, had the most diverse teams in the world, perhaps, at that moment, all internationals from all different countries and from all types of different skill sets. But the challenge was in the fact that diversity was in play. The challenge was, could they work together? Could they work well together in a high intensive environment? And that's the first time I met you, Greg. And what I'd seen with Greg was he always exhibited that smile that you see one right now, a very open, disarming smile. And then he would challenge and ask hard questions, and yet was able to move things forward. So I'm not surprised that somewhere from that early journeys of life, the understanding of teams, individuals, characteristics of what makes a good, successful individual on a team, and all that is important. I think we're going to learn a lot today. Greg, what's the story been from now, from that MBA to where you are today? What were the steps that you took in between there? What were the career steps?
Thank you. I think the evolution story for all of us is important. And you've intuitively keyed in on the genesis of the current company that we're building, copperteams.ai. It started with yourself, Dr. Patel, and Dr. Rob Bogosian. And the story, I think, is worthwhile telling in brief. So Boston, 2008, between Boston and Shanghai, 120 students from 37 countries at HALT. And I chose this school. I was accepted to others, but I chose this school because I had 2 questions. The first question was, everyone says there's strength in diversity. Is that actually true? I don't know. I want to go find out. Second question was, underneath our differences outward that we can see or maybe hear, are we really any different as people? The answer to both questions is absolutely there's power in diversity, with a caveat, once you know how. And the second one is that my understanding from that experience is that we all are actually, we want the same things. We want love, we want respect, we want to make impact. And so in the first month, Dr. Patel and Dr. Bogosian put us together and cranked up the pressure. And I recall actually one, and it was crazy. There was one situation where there was actually two gentlemen who they basically came to a fist fight. I think that there may have been blood drawn, and it was a disagreement over, I think it was a German and a Colombian, and somebody was on time and somebody wasn't. And anyway, and they said at the end of the month, they said, okay, have you all had enough now? And we're like, yes, we've had enough. Now we'll teach you multicultural high performance teamwork. And that was actually the beginning of this company. Right. And that was the genesis of this, because by the time we were consulting for Osram in the competition with you, you can't fake that. I'm still getting goosebumps when I think about it. The ideas that came that were so much better than the idea any one of us had, they were the creation of each of our teams, were just, I still remember it, and they still give me goosebumps. And I learned so much, pay attention to that quiet person sitting in the corner, because she might be sitting on absolute gold, but she's never going to tell you, right? Unless you're, savvy enough to give her space and honor, what's going on in her mind. So many lessons. And so that was the genesis. And I left Halt and actually was going to start this company, but I didn't. I stayed with the engineering background that I had, and I built a different company. And so that's between then and now, for the last 8 years, we built a small multinational. We developed a emissions reduction technology for the energy industry. And then in 2019, we sold that to the NASDAQ leader in the space. Took a couple of years off to breathe because that was really hard. And then it was time to really honor people and get into the human side of creating, and in this case today, innovating.
Greg, first, good to see you, and really excited to hear what you're going to be sharing with us. And so let me not keep on talking and give you the floor. We've got the next 25 minutes, and then we'll do some Q&A after that.
Cool.
Okay.
And we have lots of time today, because I really have one simple concept, one key takeaway point to share, because this topic is vast and we don't want to go there today. So I would invite everyone, if you have a question throughout, very happy, throw up your hand in Zoom, right? And we can talk about it a little bit. This was billed as a discussion, and that's great. And if not, we can do Q&A at the end too. So here I go.
You have the air.
Thank you. Here we go. And that's not the right one. That's not the right one either. Just get the right one. There he is. Okay, I'll just confirm that everybody can see and there's nothing weird happening.
We can see it.
Okay. So as everyone who writes bold headlines to grab attention, I'll ask your forgiveness, and I wrote the same, but I actually believe that it's true. So my name is Greg Nook. I have a former background in engineering, and also an MBA from Halt, and as Dr. Patel mentioned, and presently this will be my third company that I'm building now. I am the founder of copperteams.ai, and we're a high-performance teamwork training company that is building AI to augment that. So what I would like to talk about today is, I believe the research points to the fact that many of our innovation teams are likely going to underperform relative to how they could, just because of something that's no one's fault. And it's the fact that we were never trained in high performance teamwork. I know that I certainly wasn't. I don't know anybody else who was, unless they happened to work for, a Fortune 50 company with incredible training, or they had the good fortune to go to a school like Halt. And so given that high performance teamwork is not trained, how does that apply to innovation outcomes, innovation teams? And I'll say straight out of the gate, the GIMI folks and IXL folks, these are the true experts in innovation. I am not. I'm applying my understanding of the human dynamic to the realm of innovation. And so if I do make the case that many of our teams underperform, and you may have had lived experience of super painful meetings, politics, conflict unresolved, and friction in your teams, what do we do about that? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. All right, so we're going to imagine that today, let's all imagine that we are the chief innovation officer of a significant company, and some of us probably are on the call. And we're building, we're going to keep this example simple. So we're building 2 innovation teams to create brand new products, significant products for our company. That's the mission. 2 teams, create significant products. We wind the clock forward and we've created the 2 teams. This is a representation, how I'm representing team 1. We've got sort of aligned people here. They're of different skill sets. They're moving fast. Things are looking really good. Team 1 is really performing. And the result at the end of the day, they create $1 billion new idea. And it's legit, right? The senior executives love it. This is fantastic. Team 2, on the other hand, looks a little bit more like this in practice. And they're kind of fighting each other. They're moving around, but not going anywhere fast. And they would, when it comes time to present their ideas, they talk about it being $1 billion idea, but really what they've created is a couple of product extensions. And the first question we have is CIOs is this their fault? What happened? What was different between team 2 and team 1? I would assert that it's not their fault. Given a bunch of assumptions, which we'll talk about later, they both have the same resources and all of the major core elements you need in an innovation team. What the research shows is that, and this is research of 2015, and I don't believe the human nature has changed since 2015, so I think it's relevant. This was on 95 teams from 25 leading organizations. 75% of cross-functional teams are in fact dysfunctional. Couple of things here. Cross-functional teams is what was studied. And I believe, in my understanding of best practices in innovation, is that we want cross-functional teams. We, on purpose, create those for innovation projects. Unfortunately, the research was showing that 75% of them are dysfunctional. How did Professor Tabrizi define dysfunctional? These teams missed a number of the metrics that were set out as measures of success. And there was a number of them. So what I'd assert here is that, I'll go back here. If everything else was equal, this is really not team 2's fault, because most people are going to do a bunch of that. And it's really not, you can't hold someone accountable for something that they've never been trained or learned. Okay. So we'll move on. The question, of course, what we want to know is what's the difference between team 1 and team 2? And that brings us to the key point of the day. So we gave both teams the right people. They were diverse groups. They had lots of experience. We gave them the best innovation tools and frameworks. They had all the corporate resources, clear direction, and they knew they had to collaborate. Both teams had that list. But the difference was in the dynamic between what was happening actually in the teams, in the rooms, between the people on team 1 and team 2. And a simple way that we can envisage this is, let's say that the team had 5 people and the CVs were amazing. All the core elements were there. But for some reason, those 5 people did not get along well. And so what they generated was mediocre results. So the key point that I would like to assert today is the dynamic of a team that's creating innovation is, in my view, equally important as all of the table stake items that are hard to put in place, but need to be there, of course, as well. And so team 1 outperformed because they were extremely, extremely good at working together and they knew how. This is actually backed up by research. I'm going to talk a little bit about Google's research into, they called it the most effective teams. They went on a research project to find out what's behind our most effective teams. It was called Project Aristotle. And this was one of the outputs. They said the quality of relationships with one's teammates can have a huge impact on performance, engagement, and innovativeness. And I think this maybe just will make intuitive sense, even if we don't know the research. If you're really getting along with people, if you support each other's ideas, if you know something about each other, the pressure's on, but you've got each other's backs, maybe you're going to come up with your best ideas and 1 + 1 could equal 5, instead of I'm just going to sit on some things. I don't really like somebody else. I'm not really into this for whatever reason. Innovation is related to the quality of relationships. And of course, relationships are part of team dynamic. So that brings us back to the key point. And so the question is, okay, team dynamic. If we assume for a moment that, yep, team dynamic is extremely important to the output of our innovation team, whether it's 50% or 30% or 60%, that's not really important. Let's say that it's important and agree on that for a moment. What is the team dynamic? Back to Google. So from 2012 to 2018, Google did an extremely deep dive on 180 teams. And to answer a simple question, what is underneath our most effective teams, our best innovators, the ones that knock it out of the park? And Google being Google, the people analytics dive they did on this was really impressive. They looked at everything, proper statistical analysis. They wanted to actually know, not just sort of think, oh, it's probably this. What they found, and the reason they say it took so long, was that most of the things that they thought were going to be there didn't show up in the top 5. Okay, so here's the reveal. The top 5 things that were common to Google's highest performing teams were: number 1, psychological safety. And this means team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. When you throw out a goofy idea, nobody's going to jump on you and say that was really goofy. When you make a mistake, a real mistake, we're going to treat that as long as it was an intentional and well-informed mistake, we're going to treat that as kind of a celebration and a learning opportunity. You're not going to receive some sort of punitive action or feeling from the people either on your team or above. Dependability was number 2. Team members get things done on time and meet Google's high bar for excellence. 3 is more of the sort of normal things that you'd expect on a team. They have to have structure and clarity, and this was in terms of clear roles, plans, and goals. And those are the normal things. Now, 4 was meaning. The work was personally important to the team members. And that's interesting. And that was, in my mind, somewhat related to impact. The team members thought that their work matters and that it creates change. And the reason I highlighted 1, 2, 4, and 5 in red is you'll notice that 4 out of the 5 things have nothing to do with the standard items of we need to have the right people, we need to have the right tools, we need to have the right resources, clear direction, support. All of those 4 things, in my understanding, are related to the dynamic that's inside the team. Another piece of research, and I promised some research today, so here's another one. This is probably very familiar to some of you, and this is Patrick Lencioni of the Table Group. In 2002, he published the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and so this is getting more towards, well, what's going on in these teams that are dysfunctional, like Team 2 that we built. And you'll see the bottom 3 things. And I'll mention first, so Patrick put this framework out in 2002, but then it's since been studied academically. And I'll point you to one validation study that actually showed complete coherence between all 5 and the relationship between high-performing teams from Dr. Judy Hamlin in 2008. So you'll notice that 3 of the items here out of 5, again, are related to the dynamic within the team, something that may not be visible in our organization. People don't trust each other. They are afraid of conflict or don't know how to do it in a healthy, productive way. And so there's not a culture of voice like Dr. Rob Bogosian talks about. They sit on their best ideas. They don't want to push. Lack of commitment, somebody's slacking off, and that goes unseen. And then that builds up resentment. And I do believe that the top 2, accountability and inattention to results, with what Dr. Patel taught us, those ones with a great innovation framework wouldn't be so much team dynamic, because the framework is going to show that, probably early, that we're really not delivering to what we said we could. But the bottom 3 are definitely about the dynamic. We are also doing some research. And so this is the dashboard for our clients. It's a high performance teamwork dashboard for a team. And there's no need to look at any of the details. I just want to point your attention to the two areas in red. And the first one is a brutal acronym that so far we call as Howdy Kio, and that's at the bottom. And this is how well do we know each other? And we don't see this in high performance teamwork academic study, and we think that it probably should be there, but we're studying it. And the reason is, if we don't know each other at a reasonable level on a personal basis, how do we have compassion for the other person? How do we have understanding for how they're showing up when the pressure's on? Maybe my mother's dying. Maybe my children have just gone away to school somewhere. There's all sorts of things that affect me in my personal life. And as much as we think in the professional world that we should keep our personal life separate, actually human beings can't do that. We know from each other when something's going on, but we don't know what it is. So I want to know your strengths. I want to know what you value. I want to know what's the best way to communicate with you and what are your triggers. These things, how well do we know each other, allows us to work so much better together. And so we're researching the correlation between how well we know each other and how well teams perform. The second one is the red circle, and this is a leading indicator score for our client teams. And this is the other thing is, how are we measuring the team dynamic? And not after the fact, but how are we measuring it in a leading indicator way so that if we do have a problem with a dynamic, well, we can support that adequately, right? Before milestones are missed or we fail. And so we're studying the effect of having leading indicators of future performance on eventual performance. And then finally, this is really a science project. We're building something called Cora, and they, I'm not sure what to call an AI. It is going to be an AI team coach. And so using the power of artificial intelligence to provide team coaching to a group of people working together, probably starting at the basic level in the beginning, and it's easy to pass off to a human, but so that it's always accessible, democratized, very low cost. And we know, I think all of us could agree that when you have effective coaching, it can make a massive difference. And AI now offers that opportunity. So we're researching if we can build Cora. So I would ask you to reflect now in our role as CIOs, Chief Innovation Officers. How is our team dynamics on our team? What are we focusing on this? And there's three questions that I built for this. And questions we can ask ourselves to reflect is, do we actually train people in how to create a very, very productive, fertile, amazing team dynamic? Do we train them how to do it? If we've trained them, then do we measure that dynamic, and not just once, but throughout the process of an innovation project in this case? Because these things, they change. It's super variable depending on what happens in the world and with us personally. And then the third question is, do we support a team once we know that a dynamic is not working very well? So we move straight to what to do. And of course, we want to be creating team ones all the time. And so we start in the logical place with what I understand, and I sort of took a broad dive through the internet and various experts, and it seemed to me there were 5 core elements. We need the right people on the team, a diverse group. They have to have sufficient experience. And then we've got to give them the best tools possible. And I think of these in terms of innovation frameworks. And then, of course, there's going to be resources that are required in order to do what we're going to do. And so they have to be adequate. Clear direction that's supported from the top, always table stakes, you need that. And everybody knows that we're going to need to collaborate as an innovation team, but that's really the jumping off point where I think most CIOs and companies stop. They say, yep, we expect you to know how to collaborate. Well, okay, but 75% of teams, cross-functional teams, are dysfunctional. So do we really know how? Now we bring in the lens of, okay, we're going to be intentional about creating the very best team dynamics in our teams. And to me, that comes as train, measure, and support. Okay. And then for our own company, we're going to create leading indicators for our own teams. leading indicators of that team dynamic so that we can monitor it and we know when to support. And then this brings me to a final point, which is really kind of, I discovered this in researching for this talk, actually. In Project Aristotle, one of the outcome recommendations from Google was that all teams create something called a team forum. And this is a regular, fairly short meeting where no work is done. No creation is done. This is only focused on the team dynamic or the team health or the team evolution or the team development, whatever the right words are. And so this is a place to monitor what's going on and discuss how is it actually going between us. It's a space to train in terms of tough things like, we've had some conflict and it's sitting there residual. And if we don't clear it, good things are not going to happen, right? This is a space to clear issues in a structured way and then to refine our process as a team. So Google recommends this as a best practice for the most effective teams. And this just so happens, and I was delighted to see this, this is how we engage with our clients, is we train and support in monthly 2-hour forums throughout a year to level up the team's performance. That's how we do it. So in conclusion, I would like to share and assert that the dynamic between the people who are innovating is just as important, and in the relative size is not really the key thing to focus on, but the dynamic is just as important as all of the other things that are commonly understood and talked about in order to create great innovation teams. The team dynamic is, you could call it the X factor in a lot of teams between average performance and outstanding performance. So, are we building team ones or team twos? That is the question and your choice. If you want more information on this, that's the end of my talk for today. You can find more at copperteams.ai. And we also do something, and this is what's in my heart, is the reason I started this company is I want to help reduce suffering, human suffering in teams, and there's a lot of it. And so one thing we offer is a 15-minute, totally anonymous team profile. It's all automated, and we just set it up for you. And whether or not we end up with a client relationship with someone in the end is not important to me. It's, we want to give smart people and smart leaders information that they can act on so that they can show their teams where to go, what's working really well, what things can be improved upon, and make them more joy in their lives and reduce human suffering. So team profiles. And with that, it's time for Q&A.
Good, Greg. That was great. Do you mind let's stop sharing the screen and we'll make sure whatever was on that screen we'll share on the chat so everybody has got the direct context and information also. So Greg, first, fantastic. That was great. We learned a lot. I think you're right. My own experience is it is very last year to talk about cross-functional teams. Everybody knows about that. Everybody talks about diverse teams. That's also very last year. But what is not yet well understood is what makes those teams high performing. And high performance teams has been the challenge, always the challenge, right? And we see great stories of high performance teams when they actually deliver the result. And we got a story of Stapleton, and we got stories of people who will maybe cross the Amazon forest and how they worked and everything else. That was fantastic, right? That was good stuff. So I think this is an important topic, and we're going to do a little deeper. I want to take the time right now to introduce Brett Trusco also. He's got his hand up and he's already on the screen with us. Brett is my colleague and partner. He's the president. He was the president of the IAOIP, the International Association of Innovation Professionals. And he and I are partners in terms of where we are trying to take innovation and make innovation, democratize innovation and other things. So Brett, take a few seconds to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Sure, I'm Brett Trusco, and you can tell we have an affinity with the same hair, HP and I. Now, my question is, so I've been interested, I'm in the middle of writing an article on how to become a preferred employer. And, a lot of what you'd expect, you can pay 5 cents more than minimum wage and compete against your other employers and stuff like that. But are you familiar with anybody who's done any work in how to become a preferred team member? So putting the onus back on the team member instead of the employer, because everyone kind of says, well, the employer needs to put the right team together and be responsible for the productivity of the team and the innovativeness. But, there needs to be probably some responsibility to being a good team member. And maybe your employer even says, wow, this person has all the right skills to be a good team member, versus I hired this person because they're a great engineer. Well, I hired this person because not only are they a great engineer, but they're also a great team member. Have you seen anything like that?
There is. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but I can send you links. The thought that comes to mind is that absolutely it is incumbent upon the team members, right? Once assembled, the responsibility is theirs. And what we do, and what I think is really important, there's a principle that talks about in the research that talks about when we make something visible, right? The behavior changes. And what we're doing is we're doing people analytics to make the team dynamic visible, and then behavior changes, right? So if in our team, the dynamic is now measured periodically and visible, then what happens is it really is the responsibility of the team members to use the resources that are there to actually perform, right? It's no longer, in my mind, it's you've been given everything that could possibly be given to you, and it's visible and we know how we're doing. It's on you now. So I just want to draw the distinction between, I really feel quite strongly about, we could have 5 people on a team with phenomenal CVs, phenomenal backgrounds, and they could be totally dysfunctional, right? So the question is, once we get together, how do we move past that dysfunction? And our approach is to make the dynamic visible, to measure it periodically, and then to train the gaps. Okay, so that would be my answer. And also definitely have come across research that talks about, what are the things that great team members show up with? Those things to me, though, are necessary ingredients and also not a guarantee of a great team dynamic or performance.
Thank you, Greg.
Greg, just so you know, Brett is also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Innovation Science.
Cool.
And if this research that you're doing is interesting and ready for publishing, consider that also something to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Greg, one of the things that we've learned in terms of team building, high performance team building, is of course you want to recruit correctly. You always want to recruit correctly if you can. And if you recruit correctly, what we recruit for, and I'm talking about organizations like McKinsey, BCG, Monitor, Arthur D. Little, is we look for very smart people. We look for people who work very hard. And then we look for people who smile. And the smile part is where the team building is, the team collaboration and the friendliness and the interactions and how you interact with each other. Smiling is a simple proxy for that. But that doesn't get us there. It's at least a starting point for filtering, right? So then you put these people in teams, and then what we put in place is this thing called, every time we come at a milestone in the project, there's a review and a feedback of 360. And so the people give feedback to each other, and the assumption is the people you've hired are trained in feedback, trained in taking feedback and trained in giving feedback up front. And therefore, when the feedback sessions happen, 3 of them in a project, they get cycles of learning, hopefully. So the assumption is people are willing to learn, and they're willing to take feedback, and they're willing to give feedback. In your program, how much is feedback up front, training people on how to take feedback? And 3 questions. Number 1, how important, how much emphasis is in recruiting the right team, then training them on feedback, and then, of course, repeating the feedback series with your KPIs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. And I see we've got another question here from Kipling. And so we'll go right there in a second. So we don't get involved at this point in the recruiting, but clearly I think everyone can agree that that's super important. But one thing I learned at Halt, Dr. Bogosian actually gave me a life lesson, because I went to him at one point with our multicultural team that we were trying to make high performance, and I said, and I'll just say this, I said, Dr. Rob, how do I actually achieve this with, a team of relative B players? And this is me getting vulnerable a little bit. He was not happy with me. It's the only time in our relationship when he looked at me and he said, how do you know that they're B players? And who are you? And I went, and I have never forgotten that leadership. And it's kind of changed my life, because now I come from a place of honoring human beings, right? And a place of curiosity. So, yes, we want to hire the best. And I'm also quite convinced that that's a very subjective term, who's the best. And really it's about what can we do with the people that, okay, so we've done our best, we've hired the people we've hired, and the sun's coming up. Good morning, everybody. What can we do with the people that we have? So I'm not an expert in recruiting, but I am absolutely passionate about the potential of most smart people to do amazing things together once they're trained and they know how. So that was question one, recruiting. Two was feedback, I think, right?
Training people for feedback to be able to be more collaborative.
Yeah. So that's why we deliver our training and people analytics program typically over a year with a team, for two reasons. Number one is all of us have been through training where we learned something like giving feedback and we got all excited about it. And then the flow of life and the busyness of life happened. And then we implement almost none of it. We didn't practice it long enough for it to become a habit. And so that's why we have the repetition month to month. The other reason why we do that is because everyone's crazy busy and there's a lot to actually train in high performance teamwork. So we have to have bite-sized pieces. I'll give a quick example before we go to question three. There's we have worked with a prominent electric car company where when we do our analysis of with our high performance teamwork diagnostic, something that, in order to give great feedback, like really meaningful feedback, there need to be two things: high levels of trust within the team and psychological safety. Otherwise, the feedback is going to be surface level. And with this electric car company, when we measured three teams we engaged with, one team had very high levels of trust and psychological safety. The other two had extremely low levels, and we measure this, right? So this is the dynamic. And I asked the leader with high, because I was surprised that it was high. And he told me, well, I said, why do you think your scores in your team are high with trust and psychological safety? And he said, well, I guess it's because I really care about the people on my team. And I've actually been told to care about them less. I was like, okay, but this is the foundation for all performance in the future. And we know from the Google research, trust and psych safety are like the foundational elements. So we have to measure those things. And so that's actually where we start with the training before feedback is how do you rapidly build trust in a team? What are the key components of psychological safety, and how do we practice this, not just as leaders, but as team members, right? Because it's not one way. So that's feedback. And your third question again, please.
It was essentially in the feedback itself. I mean, you have to, and you mentioned the answer already, where we put 3 cycles of feedback in every project.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives a chance for person to change, adapt, and modify versus giving feedback at the back end. But you need to be clear about the KPIs you're measuring on the feedback. And so I'm interested in knowing what were the KPIs that you guys were using.
Yep.
Such that you use those in the discussion of the feedback.
Yeah, for sure. So we that's why this team forum is such a special space. And so totally aligned with what you're talking about, which is fantastic. A regular periodic feedback review session. We do that every month in forum. And we're just talking about the team process. And we review both hard and soft metrics. So the hard metrics are always going to change, depending on the team mission. But the soft metrics, we have ones that we always measure, and then we have ones that will drop in and we're measuring every month, right? Because we're training on that particular item. So for example, robust decision-making. Again, super grateful for the training at HALT. most people have not been trained how to make a robust decision.
Yep.
They just make it however they make it. And so we train on that, and that would be a soft thing that we measure every month in Forum if we're training robust decision making. The things that never change are trust, psychological safety, and the alignment to goals, right? And between the team members, because when those are the things that never change. And so we're measuring the foundational elements all the time, and then the hard metrics that are measured and feedback upon in that space in Forum, those change.
So I'll just summarize what I heard, guys. We do feedback. All of us do feedback to make teams high performing, but the two elements of most importance were the safety part and the vulnerability part, where you can be safe in your environment, say what you want to say, but and also there was the trust part. If you don't have either one of those two things, you're probably not going to have high performance teams. We'll have some feedbacks, which are usually how did he do his work? Did he do his work on time? Those kind of things. But where's the safety question? Where's the psychology? Those questions should be included also. I'm going to move the question to Kipling. Kipling, welcome. Tell us who you are and where you're from, and then the question.
So I'm also a Holt alum, and I want to throw out, Greg, I met you in London in 2009. Great speech then, great speech now. You've improved. Let's go with that. And one of the reasons why I actually went to Holt was your speech. Your wife was there. I don't know if you're still together, but if you are, great. Oh, fantastic. She was a winner, so I'm glad you guys are still together. For me, this feels a little bit like Agile, but it feels like Agile on steroids. And so my organization is going through an Agile transformation right now to get away from waterfall. And we're definitely having team dynamic issues, but it seems to be at the family level. And how are you, do you have experience layering this into an Agile kind of platform? And how do you kind of run with it from there? Because yeah, those are just my challenges in life. And I figured this was a really timely presentation. So thanks, Greg.
Wow, man. Kipling, of course, I remember meeting you in London. Thank you for all the kind words. It makes my heart shine. You're actually talking about a challenge that we have right now. CopperTeams.ai is 18 months old. So the patterns and everything else are 18 months in the making. And one of the challenges we have right now is if I go and talk to 10 people about their teams, 7 of those people want to know more, 5 want a proposal, and I'm not sure what the conversion rate is yet, right? Because we're too new, but I don't know where to focus. So we're training the local municipality of where we live, the local government, a First Nations, a school, some small companies, some very large companies, right? And we think we're going to focus in the M&A integration space because M&A, for people who've just been part of a merger and acquisition, it's been described to me as a forced marriage that I didn't know about yesterday, and very challenging. So the commonality here is humans. Whether we're in an agile or a merger, it's a group of humans that have talents and skills and hopes and desires that are trying to do something together. And so what we actually have right now is a challenge of where do we focus? And I don't have the answer to that yet, because people just keep saying, yes, we have this problem. So in the agile world, I don't look at it as any different than any other one. We have some experience in M&A integration now, and it's pretty extreme. There's some people are going to lose their jobs typically, right? So there's fear. And then there's 2 different cultures that are being rammed into each other. And so maybe there's a cultural element between agile and waterfall, a different way of thinking, a different way of approaching things. There's always going to be these challenges. They never end, right? And so when we get a group together, we get aligned, we're clear on where we're going and why we're going there. We build up some trust, we build up some psych safety, and then we practice, because there's no one workshop or seminar that's going to silver bullet this ever. That's why we do Forum every month or 2 hours with a custom team development plan based on where they're starting today, where are you at now, and then where are we going together. And that's why we do something that's a little crazy in professional services, we promise to increase a team's performance, guide them to increasing their performance by at least 20% in a year. Well, they don't have to pay us, right? Because it works, right? We can measure it. We can talk about it. We can talk about it in a very deep level, not a surface level. And people in that safe space of forum, especially 2 or 3 forums in, people will share things that I've never heard before in a business setting, but they're material to what's going on in that team.
Yep.
Right? You remember back, Joe, 3 years ago when this situation happened, you really broke trust with me. And I've never been, we've never been the same since. It happens all the time, but it just put it in the corner in the closet and don't talk about it. So that would be my response is, humans trying to do something. It's not easy, but we can make that easier.
Kipling, just a question for you. You were talking about family structures in here too.
Yeah.
And again, this is all about politics and power and positions of next generation being. It's a common issue everywhere, and I think the same things are in place. Safety, psychology, all the things that I think Greg talked about are all in place also. But there is this thing of a dynamic of the patriarch or the matriarch was in play.
Well, and
go ahead.
like totally appreciate that. Like the political level, obviously the higher you go, the more it comes because people are looking to position for the next role, the what have you. But going back to the human side of things, so what I've implemented on my team, hopefully I'm aligned more to the one team as opposed to the 2 teams where there was no emotional trust, is, you have that regular feedback and you try to be honest, right? And so throughout my career, maybe it's driven from Holt, maybe even from that London conversation, we're going to have tough conversations, but start off with, how's your family? How's home life? What's going on? All right, here's performance. What's the challenge? Why is it lagging? Because if you get the family stuff out of the way at the beginning, you can understand if, oh, my dad just passed away and I had to plan a funeral. No wonder the last 2 weeks have been garbage. If you don't know, you're never going to be able to understand the dynamic there. So, but I really appreciate the chat and the refocus on the human side of things. I'm going to steal some of your slides and just drive it in.
And a quick gift for everyone, if this is not a known practice, knowing that trust is the foundation for all teams. Patrick Lencioni writes in his book, and I've got about 7 years of experience doing this through the Entrepreneurs Organization. If you want to build trust rapidly in a team, do a little exercise, something called, there's many names for it, but it's really fun. You say, okay, now we're going to each share our leadership journey. And people talk all about work, and you say, whoa. It starts when you were born. And the context, and you don't have to go into gory detail, but the each person can have 5 minutes. The highs and lows of your life since birth are your leadership story, and they formed who you are today. And you should see how trust rapidly increases in a group. You could do it in an hour, right? Just because we know a little bit about each other now, we can have greater compassion. Now I trust you a little bit, you trust me because we know something about each other. So you could disguise it as let's talk about our leadership journey, or another name for it is the lifeline. And there's lots of precedent that this is a really powerful tool. And Adi, I see a question.
Greg, there was a colleague of ours, and Adi's going to come on now. He's going to share that. But Adi and I work with a gentleman at Monitor who wrote books on leadership and having productive discussions in difficult environments. And he studied divorced couples, or couples who were in family structures. And he had microphones put up in their houses, listened to the conversation. And he found that some couples were able to have very productive conversations, even in incredible stressful environments. And others under the same stress would raise their voices, get upset, get angry, and everything else. And he extracted out what the key learnings were. And in there were learnings similar to what you're talking about, safety and psychological safety and all that. But there was something very interesting, that all of us fall back under pressure on those 5 or 6 stories that you mentioned earlier on, stories that you heard as you grew up, stories that you use to make decisions quickly upon. stories that allows you to say, look, I don't have all the tools right now. I got to make a decision. And you fall back on those 5 or 6 stories of how dad did something once in one situation, or you yourself were confronted by somebody, and as a result, you learned something and you use that. So we do go back to our childhood experiences to make decisions in stressful environments. So I'm going to hand this thing over to Adi, because Adi might have wanted to add something else to it. But Greg, you can add to that after Adi's question.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Greg. First of all, very, very insightful discussion. And I think you highlighted a really critical element in innovation that sometimes is overlooked.
Adi, who are you? Who are you? Give us your background, and then we'll come back.
Okay, sure. So as Itendra mentioned, Itendra and I go a long way back. I was part of Monitor and actually worked alongside Itendra when the IMI team joined Monitor. Later on, I worked with Accenture. I was a partner there for about 16 years in the innovation practice. And now working with IXL on various initiatives. We focus on the Innovation Olympics that Itendra mentioned earlier on. So my question, Greg, you mentioned team performance and measuring team performance. I know it sounds very basic, but it may mean very different things to different people. So how do you measure team performance? What are the dimensions of team performance that you believe are important to measure and can be measured?
I really appreciate that question, because there is lots of different understandings there and ambiguity around what does that mean. And I think a lot of people would just default to performance equals the hard metrics. Did you meet the goals that were set out initially? Right? We measure team performance holistically and in advance of performance, the hard metrics being delivered, because that's the end. Last quarter's results or this innovations project's results, those are in the bank, whatever they are. So the first thing is we measure it holistically. What does holistically mean? And this was the challenges, was assembling all of the thought leaders in this space, all of the major thought leaders into a holistic assessment. And it took us over a year to do this. Dr. Rob Bogosian, now full disclosure, is an advisor to Copper Teams, which is super cool. And also Dr. Tim Reschulti. And the 8 dimensions, I'll summarize it this way. So our diagnostic has at present 70 questions. Okay, so we're looking at 70 different elements, but there's not 70 different buckets, if you will, that we're measuring. There's some that take a few to measure. The 8 dimensions that we're measuring at this point are, number 1, compelling vision. That's the battery for a group of people. And at the electric car company, you can imagine the compelling vision scores were off the chart. We're changing the world. We're electrifying everything. That's wonderful. It's super important. But you can have a compelling vision if we make socks or whatever, right? Because it's important that we have that clear and that it is actually compelling. So compelling vision is number 1. Alignment on large goals, right? So the big goals, what are the long-term, annual, something like that? And we're not talking about, I mean, they have to be, the goals need to be created, goals or OKRs properly, so that it's clear what we're doing, but it's the alignment to those that we measure, okay? Then after we have alignment on big goals, the third dimension we measure is the alignment on near-term goals. How did we break that long-term goal into short-term goals that are actually manageable, something that we can actually do something about? And again, the alignment of those, because if we don't agree on what they are, it's going to be a challenge to meet them as a team, okay? Fourth dimension, and we're going through 8. The fourth dimension is what we call team skill mastery. And this is the tactical things like, how do we run meetings? How do we do feedback sessions? How do we make decisions? They're all the tactical stuff that we do together. And it's really important, right? Has anyone on the team been trained as a facilitator? Because for example, we know that a really well facilitated session with someone or with a group can be vastly more productive than one that's not, right? So team skill mastery, number 4. Number 5 is the team development plan. If we agree that the dynamic is where all the work gets done between us, or the magic, then, and that maybe we're not perfect at this point, we're not 10s out of 10, what are we doing about that? And so what's the team development plan look like? But not individual development. That's a separate thing that other people do, but the team dynamic. Number 6 is what we call the psychological foundation. And this really should be put up at number 1, but we have compelling vision there. The psychological foundation for us has 4 components: trust, psychological safety, commitment, and healthy conflict, right? And when we have all those things dialed, everything else gets a whole lot easier, right? And by the way, when everyone says, yep, it's kumbaya on our team, we score that low, right? Because that means people are sitting on a whole lot of gold or opportunities, right? Because they don't want to rock the boat. And then the 8th one is something that I think we're contributing to the body of knowledge, which is this: how well do we know each other, right? And its impact. And so we measure that as well. So those are the 8 dimensions that we're measuring. We feel like that's holistic about what's actually going on in a team. And that would be my answer.
Yeah, and I like it because I think all those are leading indicators that, so as you said, they're not measuring post facts, but they're actually the leading indicators to the extent the team will perform.
Eventually where we're going.
Sorry, Greg, I'll just take a pause over here. We are hitting 10 o'clock and this webinar is supposed to end at 10 o'clock. We're not going to end at 10 o'clock, we're going to continue. But I want to just make sure for those who have to sign off, we appreciate you coming on and thank you very much for being here. And for those who can stay on, let's stay a few more minutes and let Greg finish his answering some questions. And if there's any more questions, we're going to be here for a while. Okay, Greg, go ahead.
For those leaving, I just want to express my gratitude. This is something that's very much in our hearts on our team. We're here for humans. We're here for the everyday team that's struggling. And I'm just really grateful that you came today to listen. And I look forward to meeting you in person at some point.
So for everybody, it's Greg, Greg, at copperteams.ai. Copper Teams, COPPERTEAMS.ai. It's in the chat in case you don't have it. Greg, you were answering the question about leading indicators and just wrapping that section up with Adi.
Yes, thank you. The little tidbit I was going to throw in was we're working with the president of a company, collaborating with a president of a company in the US that has 22,000 employees. And we do not have this capability today, but what he's excited about is, I would say within 18 months, we will. Imagine you have a dashboard that's a heat map and you've got 1,000 teams, and dynamically, because this changes over time, it starts to show red where the team dynamic is suffering in the particular teams. And now you know where to go to support before the milestones or the metrics are missed. And so that is kind of an exciting prospect, for this president. And I'm excited to build that because, we really can't hold anybody at fault for a team that blows up and doesn't work.
The 90s with Arthur D. Little. And this happened in the R&D teams first and then the innovation teams, because this is where the highest level of pivots were happening. You'd move in one direction, then you had to change direction, you get new information, and people didn't like to change. A big piece of this was change. People don't like changing, they like the plan, let's stick with the plan type of thinking. And so we're looking for people who are agile, people who are flexible, but disciplined. We are looking for people who are creative, but structured. We're looking for people who were, and so it was almost like opposing forces were in play in the team itself to be able to move quickly and pivot and change direction. And therefore, a big percentage of people were saying, I need very strong structure. I need lots of discipline. I need rules on how we're going to work. But at the same time, we needed a lot of flexibility, a lot of creativity, a lot of team-based decisions versus hierarchical decisions. And this is going to get increasingly important because we are moving in a world that moves faster, in a world that is more ambiguous and more uncertain, and more science and technology coming from everywhere. And so what Greg's talking about is absolutely probably foundational. If you don't build high-performance teams, you aren't going to be able to win because somebody else is building a high performance team. And so you need the edge, and you need to make sure that you start hiring right, you start training right, you start getting feedback right, you start giving KPIs right, and you miss on one, and this four-legged stool or five-legged stool is going to fall over. Yeah. So, Greg, I have another point. Just thoughts on this thing. We're increasingly moving towards this AI world, and this team AI coach that you mentioned sounds very intriguing and very exciting. And we tend to listen to people we respect: dad, mom, maybe a priest, a professor, somebody you in the organization. And this AI coach probably will be able to earn trust quickly because the AI coach will be more objective than any person will ever have. It will use data that is much more objective also. And so everybody will have this AI coach on the shoulder, observing your own behavior, as well as observing how the team dynamics are and everything else. How do you see this team coach coming in versus a human coach now, where they may see different things and how they interact with each other? How are you going to put judgment into the individual to be able to take inputs from the digital coach, which perhaps will get better, the human coach, which has got emotion based in there, and yet love and a better way to maybe communicate, which the AI coach will eventually get also? But what's your thoughts on the emergence of the digital coach? Because Brett and I are hoping that in our last 10, 20 years of our careers, we'll be the coaches to many people. But if this AI stuff is coming, what are we going to be doing?
Yeah, that's a super question. And I mean, this really is cutting edge stuff. So the first thought is, one of our advisors is like a $1,500 an hour C-suite coach. So he only coaches C-level folks. And he and a group of friends got together and started playing with ChatGPT. This would have been about 3 months ago. And after an hour, the expression was, the consensus in the room was, uh-oh.
Yes.
It's already not bad.
Yep.
Now, having said that, they were projecting into the future, because right now my view is that the hallucinations that we hear about with AI, with these LLMs, and especially in the realm of like a team coach or a personal coach, these hallucinations, or the AI makes something up, for example, that's not okay. If we're giving someone advice, imagine an extreme case where our team coach says, Hitendra, looks like I've looked at all the data that the team is contributing. We've talked a little bit, and I think you should quit and go to a different company. That would be a radical hallucination that may just, that AIs could do today, which is not okay, right? So that there is some time before these things are actually reliable and accurate, but the speed at which the different language models and the AI engines are being developed, like our CTO, it blows my mind. This stuff is truly on an exponential curve on its capabilities. So I would say that for sure it's coming, right? It's coming. The chatbots, the interfaces are getting better. There's a service called Synthesia, and they make human avatars that you just type text in, and they teach. So for training, right? And they're really pretty good in any language you want. So that's the first part. The next part is the interface between the digital coach, as you asked, and the human coach. A couple of things come to mind. The first is there are services now that are starting to become really popular. AI romantic partners, an AI girlfriend, an AI boyfriend. And you say, how is that possible? Why is that attractive to anyone?
Awesome. Oh, no, oops, sorry. Did I say that? Just kidding.
And the truth is all of us have been to a movie and felt emotions, haven't we? So that's an example of something that's digital can establish emotions within us. We have proof that it's possible. So the AI coach, I think at the starting level where we're starting, is going to be extremely valuable for two reasons. One is that when you talk to another human, there's always two egos involved, mine and yours, right? And we all have it. It's a part of our psyche. Some of us have better handle on that than others, right? But there's always two egos. And so because of that, I'm always sensitive to how I'm going to be judged with another human. With the AI, that's gone, right? I know that it doesn't have an ego. And I know that if I feel confident that the discussion with my AI coach is truly confidential and it's not being shared with, HR or something like that, I may say things there and get insights there that I would never share with anyone else. So there's a piece of this that's actually really great. The balance part, if we think about the Tao, the Tao Te Ching, the balance part is the AI coach may sound empathetic and warm and emotional, but it's never going to be that, right? And so we, on an ethics basis, have decided that at this point, we're always going to offer hybrid coaching. It's going to be AI for the maybe level 1 type of coaching support things, but there's always going to be a human coach involved, right? Either monitoring or available on a push of a button. And even if the AI coach gets extremely good ethically, we're going to always have the human involved because of all of the reasons, right? And there is nothing that is a substitute in my mind for consciousness, authentic connection, being real with someone and being there for them. I have my doubts whether AI coaching will ever get to that point, and that's a really helpful thing for human beings, and hence our decision to always stay hybrid AI human coaching.
Greg, thank you very much. I think we need to bring this webinar to an end. It's always a pleasure to host a student who has now become the teacher. And so it's the biggest gift ever to any professor when the students become, they learn, they master the topics, and they go out there and they become better than the teachers themselves. You have learned. You're the Yoda now. So congratulations on that. I'm very proud of your success and your accomplishments. I'm going to give you a chance to think a little bit about the last word. So you got about a minute to say what's the last word. But I'm going to kind of just say some high-level stuff for everybody who's listening. In innovation, ideas are important, but it's the team that makes it real. And the teams that you put together, don't leave them to chance. Put them with thought, give them the coaching and the guidance and everything that goes with it. You would never take a random team to cross the Amazon forest. You'd choose the team wisely. You'd make sure that you've got all kinds of complementary skills. You would want to make sure that they all kind of smile and hang together and are collaborative and helpful. And one dysfunctionality means you die. And innovation projects are the hardest projects on the planet. And therefore, why would you mess around by saying who's available? Oh, Peter and Jane, let's put them on the team. There's a reason why they're available. There's a reason why they're available. Choose the team that matters to make it real. And that's my appeal. And today, Greg, you have the last minute to tell these people why this is so important.
Mm-hmm. Everything that happens or doesn't happen happens inside the team dynamic. Everything else being equal. I would ask everyone to honor the human beings that are on a team, and before we judge them, see how they are together and support them in being better together. And that dynamic is going to improve, because until that does improve, we actually don't know. No, it's all about honoring the humans, because that's where it all starts.
Greg, thank you very much. We learned a lot today. We appreciate it. For those who are listening, thank you very much for attending the GIMI Think Tank. We meet every single week. We talk about innovation trends. We talk about innovation management. We talk about what's going on in innovation around the world. Thank you very much. We look forward to just joining us again next week. And remember, our mission remains the same: to train and certify 1 million people worldwide in the next 5 years. And the way we're going to do it is together. And so in our mantra, together we can. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.